welcome back to the Childhood Cancer Perspective, and thank you all for sticking with me through all of these episodes as I continue to detail our journey with our daughter, JC. One of the coolest things that this podcast has allowed me to do is be able to reach out and connect to an entire community of not only parents and families, but also organizations, and be able to share their stories and their journeys to give everybody a more in-depth, inside look, unfiltered and uncensored at pediatric cancer, something that social media will mute and censor a lot of everything. I can say what the hell I want here. So one of the cool things I have now today is an author and a mother that has taken it upon themselves to create something that I think we've all looked for and wanted our entire lives in this journey in itself. And, going through life, I've always said there's a million books on how to raise kids, but most of those books are written by people that don't have kids. This book that I'm going to talk about today, and the author and my guest is about pediatric cancer, but a guide and an inside view of somebody who has actually experienced it. So today, my guest is Laura. Thank you so much for being with me today, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I've been a fan of your podcast and really admire the voice that you're putting out there for people, unfiltered and uncensored, and just a place for us to talk.
Yeah, it's been incredible and an outlet that I've been looking for a long time. So I'm so thankful that I'm able to do that and be able to make the connections that I've been able to make. So tell us a little bit about how you got into this space, your story from the beginning, your daughter Cecilia, and then we'll talk more about what drove you to write this book.
Sure. Like many of you, the diagnosis came as a total surprise and shock. She was just a little vivacious 3.5-year-old running around. And at nearly before her 4th birthday, she was diagnosed with childhood leukemia. And I think I remember hearing on one of your podcasts once, it actually was me who insisted, no, we're taking a blood test. There's something not right. So that was sort of the beginning of the advocacy journey for our child, as we knew something was wrong and went together to get that blood test and stayed together, my husband, Arn, and I, to get those results. And she was diagnosed with ALL, and we were on our journey. And it was really from early on that I knew I needed to do this. I got more on a soapbox about the entire process because it was day 2, and our oncologist, who was magnificent, let me be clear about that. I remember where he was standing in the doorway and he was casually going through the statistics for her survival, which of course to any parent, any statistic sounds terrible. And then he said, so, she has a 85% chance of survival with this particular disease if it all goes well, but she'll never do math or science. And I remember my jaw just falling to the floor. And it might sound a little silly, and sometimes when I think about it in retrospect, it's like, of all the things that you're worried about right at this moment, you're worried about math and science. But what struck me in that comment was, you mean cancer is going to take away potentially my child's life, and you're telling me that if she survives, she's not going to be who she intended to be. And as we all know as parents, you can see little shades of our kids when they're tiny, and she was just such a little scientist and loved nature and loved biology and all that kind of stuff. And so I was furious, and that really was the catalyst. That situation was a catalyst for me. The second situation that was a catalyst for change was probably a week later. I walked into Clinic D looking like we all do, week 2 of, or week 1 of treatment. And a woman came up to me with a baby strapped to her and one in a stroller, and she said, "You look like you need help. I'm Irene." And she taught me from that encounter that there were options. There were things that we could do. There was places I could go to talk to different people. So she said, "Give me your email. I have information for you. I know what this phase is like." Her son Luke was about, I don't remember how far ahead of us, but farther ahead of us. And as we're talking, the two of them just start running around Clinic D like 4-year-olds do, having a grand time, and a friendship that was formed that stayed forever. And she was the one that introduced me to the concept of parents talking to parents, that parents knew things that the doctors didn't know, which, as my generation, I think we had phased out of how our parents were, of thinking that the doctors knew everything, because how could they? They're specialists in what they do. But there's this whole other side to it. And the way I looked at it was, okay, Best case, Cecilia had an 85% chance of survival. So that rest of the percentage was up to us to figure out. But there was no roadmap. There was no guidebook. Like, what am I supposed to do? What's the right thing to do? What's the wrong thing to do to help her? And then every step along the way became that interesting journey of how do you advocate for your child? God, I don't know, and no one's telling me how. How do I ask for what I need? No one's telling me, and I don't even know what I need. And it continued from there. The last, so I started taking notes at the time, like Irene did, because I wanted to be that person for somebody else, and just jotting little ideas like, if you take vincristine, try this afterwards, or if you take methotrexate, try that afterwards, because the mom and dad network was pretty huge in having data for how different children responded differently, because of course we're all so different. And I have tremendous respect for Cecilia's medical team. I think they kicked ass. Their job is to save her life, and our job as parents is everything else. And that's the data. That's the thing that has been missing. And the last little piece of the puzzle was pretty early on too, that I think set the tone for me wanting to write this book eventually, which was we went to a magnificent a magnificent camp for children with cancer who are currently in treatment. And we were so excited because my husband and I were like, we're going to meet people who know stuff and they're going to help us. And they're way ahead of us in treatment because we were so new. We were just a couple months in. And the kids ran off and played safely with the medical teams, and they just had such a good time. And we went to that first meeting. And of course, it was just the nature of who happened to be in the room at that day. But on that day were people who were 6 months ahead of us, a year ahead of us, 5 years ahead of us, 10 years ahead of us, in complete abject despair still about their journey, about what was taken from them, about what they didn't know, what they still needed to know. And once or twice in the very beginning of the conversation, Arna and I kind of raised our hands and said, oh, but what if you try this? And then we kind of nudged each other and realized we don't, we're brand new. We should just be listening. But I came away from that meeting knowing one thing, depressed as hell, and knowing one thing, both of us knew one thing was we don't want to end up like that. So what's the plan? And slowly and carefully, between the two of us, between the people I met, between being brazen and reaching out to researchers and other people, we found our way. And I just knew I always had a book in me, but it took time. It took time. It took healing. As we all know, there was one great book out there, Nancy Keene's, and I'm so thankful for it. And that was it. And what shocked me is when I started to write this book, that was, of course, the first thing I did was to check in and see, okay, surely there's 15 books by now, and there's none. So I knew it was time.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I was getting through and reading, and I've been privileged enough to be able to read the proof and get some insight into the book. And it is from start to finish, like day one, what you need, where you need to go, who you need to ask. It's so incredible. And, for most parents going through this, you're thrown into the fire like a deer in headlights, and you have nothing. You have no support aside from, social workers and things like that, but an actual guide of what you need to do or how you should react, or at least options to give you, and to have absolutely nothing. I know with our diagnosis with JC, we had nobody to talk to. We had no friends that were going through this. And along the way, we've made friends and connections and things like that, but that support system wasn't there, and that book wasn't there. And it's so incredible because as I've been going through it, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, I wish I would have known that. I wish I would have known that. I wish I would have done that. I wrote in big letters, not having a go bag screwed me so many times. Wearing what you're wearing, going to the hospital and being stuck there for 12 days, not knowing you're going to be there. That sucks. And there's only so much stuff. Yeah, there's only so much stuff you can buy in the gift shop. And, and you can't even get a phone charger at 2 a.m. from a nurse that's, you know what I mean? It's tough. Little things like that are so incredibly important. And to have this now or to have this soon for people is so incredible. And I think it's going to be huge, and it's going to be such a game changer. So, I wish we'd have had it, 4 years ago, but I'm so glad that it's here now.
Oh, I'm grateful for that. I really hope to address, because wasn't JC's diagnosis pretty unusual too? Like you really didn't have a squad of people to talk to. So I'm aiming in this book to take a cancer parent of any diagnosis, like you said, from day one all the way through, because there's a bunch of stuff that we all need to know at the same time and learn how to do, be it what to bring to a hospital, being what can I ask my oncologist about? What am I allowed to advocate for? How do I ask for help from friends and neighbors? What if I don't have a partner? How do I address getting stuff done? What about my other kids? And so chapter by chapter, I go through that with the reader and then offer specific tips. And I have a great editor and publisher who, it was all in my head. So I was like, just bring a go bag. And they're like, no, no, no. You have to remember how you felt when that happened. You need to list out by item. And of course, my comprehensive list is different from yours, but you're going to get started when you're in the zone and your head is exploding. You at least go, oh yeah, I do want that. And actually, I want chocolate too. And I need this book and whatever it is for each individual person. And of course, there's a long list of things that you just got to have.
Mhm. Yeah, I think no doubt you're going to see, if it was me at this point, I would have a full set of colored sticky notes knowing exactly, okay, now I need to know what I need to do for the hospital stay. Now I need to know, what do I do to ask questions? And it's going to be incredible. And that's the way that I would have used it. And when we talk about the advocacy side of it, I think one thing that people need to remember is, at the moment when, and I've said this before, but at the moment when you're in that doctor's office, whether you're in there for a visit or you're a hospital stay, whatever, you need to remember you are their only patient at that moment. Like, I will say that till I'm blue in the face. You are their only patient. I don't care whatever else they have to do. I don't care about their next appointments. I'm sorry, but that's at that moment. You ask them everything you need to ask them, and you get the information that you need. I wish I would have taken more detailed notes and things like that. During JC's stem cell treatment, I had my computer there because we were there for 40 days. And every single time something happened, I have a complete list, and I wrote it down, the time when she was sick or when she had a treatment. Like, I did that then, and it was very, very helpful to go back and then ask questions and talk to the doctors or say, hey, this happened here. What do we need to do? And it was very helpful. And so that is an incredible thing to really remember, is to just, as parents, I think a lot of people can recite this stuff, but having it written down allows you to free your brain of all that extra clutter and just revert back to it when you need to. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah, it's super important that the whole advocacy piece is not intuitive to a lot of people, and not everyone would do what you had done to take those notes. And so that's the intention behind the reminders and the toolbox tips is, you have this power. Plus, your medical team actually expects it of you, because yes, we have a protocol. Sometimes it's more cookie cutter than others, right? But they don't. Your child's reaction to everything that's going on is completely unique, and they lean on you to know, hey, I know it says that we're not supposed to throw up with this medicine, but my kid's throwing up. So how about some anti-nausea medicine or some peppermint? What can we do to help my kid because it's not working? And then if they say, well, that's not really how this drug's supposed to go, you sit on it until your child is given what they need. And knowing that you have that, is empowering. And I really aim to empower parents step by step to know, oh yeah, I can ask for that. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be aggressive about it. It's always, I don't know how you found it, but I always found it, at least when you're first admitted, to be the nicest person in the room, because there's there's no reason not to be. And then people are more willing to work with you. There's advocacy in simple things like, hey, my kid's going to take a nap now, so I'm going to put a note on the door. So can you please have them come by to do vitals later? You can do that. Or simple things like, when you're coming in to do an IV poke or you're doing a blood draw, we're going to choose which arm that is. And then my child, we called it whale breathing, but it was Lamaze breathing. And we had a total protocol. So Cecilia was down for the shots if you did it the way that she expected and she knew. So we advocated for her to have the same routine every time, make the choices. What do you want, Cecilia, left or right? And she never cried. And she never cried because she wasn't, well, of course, we think she's magical, but she didn't cry because she's not magical. She didn't cry because she had power. And she had power because we advocated for her.
Yeah, it's so important. And, I know that when you're in there, it is very mama bear, papa bear, right? You want to take over, you want to ensure that your child is safe, and it is very easy to kind of lose your cool with people. However, understanding that they're stressed out too, and they're seeing all these kids every day. But I know that you have to really make sure that they understand how your child is going to be treated and taken care of, because they are all unique. None of them are going to react the same to any of this. I know, honestly, I can say that in the time that we were in treatment, there was one doctor and one nurse that were not allowed to treat JC because of their bedside manner. Honestly,
Yeah.
they had a bad attitude when they came in, and I said, that's not going to happen here. That if you're,
Good for you.
and it wasn't like I wanted to be a jerk, anything. It was like, listen, you chose this job. You chose this shift in the middle of the night. That's not my problem. If you're going to come in and have an attitude, my child is already scared. She's been away from home for almost 2 months now. That's not going to happen anymore. And I made sure of that. And, that was when, your nurse managers and things like that will get involved, and patient advocates will get involved. You just have to know when it's okay for you to step up, and when it's okay for you to just, give that little nudge, like, this is the way we want things to happen. And we want to make sure that everything goes smooth in a really terrible time.
Yeah. And there's things like, there's so many things like that in the book, and also including, I don't know how you felt, but I didn't know, because no one told me. I think it was more expected, that it really is also up to us to check everything. So when you walk in that room bleary-eyed and exhausted and stressed, you also are the one that's double checking. Is this the right medicine? Is this the right timing? Is this the right? And that's a tall order. So knowing those things early on, that is what your roles are. I define it out by what your roles are and what you really need to worry about right now, because of course, at least I did. I'm curious how you felt, but in the beginning, you just wanted to do it all, fix it all, figure it all out. You vacillate between that and being completely and absolutely paralyzed.
Mhm.
And then, but there's really, as you reflect back, there's things you really got to know in month one, week one. And there's a bunch of stuff you can just leave it be for a bit. And then there's a bunch of stuff that you take on after that fact, including more advocacy about latent effects. I think one thing I'm super passionate about is that if you're lucky enough and your kid survives, you need to get involved in that survivorship early on. And that's never a conversation that oncologists have time to talk about, because, again, they're busy saving your child's life. And there is no standard. I believe I've heard you talk about this on your show too. There's no standard post protocol, which is nuts. So when things come up as latent effects and different protocols for your child, there is no one-stop shop where you can go, oh, okay, so at 14 we should be thinking about this post-treatment, and on and on and on. It's a constant advocacy thing. And at a certain point, you're passing the baton to your child, if you're lucky enough and they're getting old, and to figure those things out. So that has been a journey too. I would say survivorship, the thinking of survivorship for me felt like, and this is a big part of what we're talking about with advocacy, it felt like I didn't have the right or the privilege to even consider that we would be a survivor. I wanted to live in hope. I wanted to live in, it's going to be okay. But as we know, there's that constant looking over your shoulder of like, oh shit. And you're surrounded by people who, with the same protocol. We had a little squad of 6 that were magical, wonderful, gorgeous children, a bunch with the same protocol as Cecilia. 3 of them died. So one of the same cancer she had morphed into a different one, and just awful. It goes on and on. And the other 2 ended up with bone marrow transplants and a lifetime of side effects that are really, really tough. So we don't get the luxury of thinking, it's going to be fine. I don't think I've ever met a cancer parent that's like, it's good. So it's tricky to think about survivorship before it's done. And even when it's done, if you're lucky enough to get through it, you're still looking over your shoulder for a significant amount of time. And I've heard guests say that on other podcasts, just like it's not done for quite some time, as they do follow-up testing. One thing that happened to us early on was that math and science comment, which just pissed me off. And so what I did with that is I could have easily just taken it because it was so early in treatment to be even thinking about what the drugs are going to do to her. I just want them to save her. But I ended up calling I don't even know how I got his name, but just Googled it and played around and called the head researcher for her protocol and said, "Hi, my name's Laura." And he's like, "I'm sorry." I said, "I'm a mom. And my oncologist just said this to me. What's that about?" And he said he was the most amazing person. He spent probably an hour to an hour and a half on the phone with me. And he's like, "Well, that's not actually right. So here's what that actually means," and broke down what the different medications could do to the white matter in her brain, but that she was young and malleable, and they have time when we know early to rewire brains is how it was described to me. So forgive me if anybody medically inclined is listening, but that's how it was described to me, is that particularly under the age of 5, there's a lot of leeway to their little brains can figure it out a different way. And so there was a ton we could do, and we took every single piece of his advice. And she most surely did math and science, and in fact majored in it, and then got a master's in it. So I say that as an offer of hope for parents, but also a cautionary tale that waiting to see how you can address latent effects, unless you're dealing with something like a bone marrow transplant where you're just in the zone handling that, you got to get involved early. And I lay it out how you can do that clearly in the book because it's scary.
It is extremely scary. And I know when you're thinking about, I know when we were getting ready for her chemo to start or her bone marrow transplant to start, they do pre-testing, preliminary tests, and they do baselines and things like that. And so we were told early on, if you look at late term, if she gets into her adult ages, she could go deaf from one of the chemo drugs. She may never have kids because it'll affect her fertility. And there's and obviously it would slow down, the cognitive abilities and things like that. There's all these things that you're thinking about in the future. Yeah. But again, at that moment, you're thinking, okay, if I have a deaf child that can't have kids, at least I have my kid, right?
Yeah.
And the funny part was with Jace is that when her hair fell out, I was a puddle on the floor, and she came out of the shower and she handed me a handful of her hair, and she said it started to fall out, and I'm crying, and she's like, well, at least I just don't have to brush it as much anymore,
Aww.
and then we told her, you're probably never going to have kids, and she goes, that's okay, I'll just adopt. And these kids at 6, 7, 8 years old are so freaking incredible and genuine and innocent that kind of stuff doesn't matter to them. And they just, they're just like, okay, whatever. And when we heard all that stuff, it's, okay, we're thinking about it in our minds and how can you fix it? How can you do something? But honestly, in the very beginning, you're just thinking, I don't care about any of that as long as they're here. But I do love honestly, I love the way things are laid out in the book in that sense of because if we had that type of guideline or that type of even a little, just a minuscule piece of information of what we should ask or what we should do, that reaching out to researchers or the protocol, that people like that, I've only just now started to do that, reaching out to doctors and things like that, because with JC's type of cancer, there's no set protocol. There is no protocol for it. And
it was unique to each child, right?
Right.
For hers.
Exactly. Because we have, when she was diagnosed, the way we looked it up, it was about 30 kids in the U.S. every year were diagnosed with that type of cancer. And we have met so far probably a dozen families in our time that have been diagnosed with that. Some are still living, some are with total resection. Some are living with dormant they're stable tumors, and some have passed, but not one has ever had the same type of protocol or even the same type of drugs that JC had, which just, that in itself is, pediatric cancer in itself is a lot of darts on a board and hoping that it works, right? And so when you can get that in-depth information of, okay, these are the drugs that are going in, or this is a protocol, but this is how we can counteract it. Because let's be honest, these people are creating these protocols, or they're in charge of them, and probably sitting there waiting for people to ask them questions, right?
Totally, yeah.
They feel like, okay, I did all this great work and nobody even knows that I did it, but you reach out and ask them that question. They were probably ecstatic to give you that information and know that it could do some good for you and so many other people.
Yeah. And what pisses me off is that that's and like you said so beautifully, every case and every child is different. And it, it should not be information that is it's not intentionally hidden, but it should just be right there for all of us to have.
Hmm.
Just right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even if it's just the fundamentals of what you can be doing to stave off um, certain latent effects, or to make them more easy to manage, or to potentially avoid them altogether.
Yeah, and a lot of the information, honestly, can be very difficult to find, and it really depends on
Very.
how headstrong you are to continue
Yeah.
to go before you give up and say, you know what, it's just not out there. I can't find it. It's there, but it's not as easy as it should be. And the reality of it is, unless and we are carrying the weight, right? As parents, as advocates, we're carrying the weight of all of this because without it, only the people that are in the know with the MD behind their name know the information. But we
Hmm.
should know that information too, because we are our child's caregivers 100% of the time, right? I say this before, and this is not a demeaning thing to say. I said it because I feel like as parents, we are 24/7 advocates, caregivers, nurses, doctors to our children. I got into an argument with somebody because he said, do you think that you're smarter than doctors? I said, yes, because I don't get to clock out at the end of the day, because I don't get to
Yeah.
go home and leave this on the table. And this child is not a number. They're a name. They're my blood. So do I think I'm smarter, book smart? No, but I'm smarter in the fact that I live it every day and we don't get to shut it off. And it was not a hit at doctors. We have some great doctors that we've met along the way. And even our oncologist that we had, who's not at the same hospital anymore, I still communicate with her. I still
Hmm.
communicate with the social worker, and the child life specialist, which I cannot advocate enough for.
Oh yeah.
They are amazing, and these are real people that when they take on a case and they look at you and they can tell they're excited they're excited to see your child because their child is who they are and they're amazing, not because of why they're seeing them. They honestly, I said this, I did an episode the other day and I was talking to somebody. I said, I could tell how important our daughter was when the day that we were told that she relapsed. And this was still during times when everybody had masks on. And for 3 years, I didn't know what anybody's face looked like below their nose.
God.
Um, and our social worker came in after we were told, and she physically couldn't speak to me because she was crying and breaking down. That's how you
Yeah.
know these people are invested in what you want.
Yeah.
And those are the people you have to have. And also, you have the power to make your team, create your dream team for your child.
You really do. And I was really lucky to and I know I can vouch for that in I felt it then, but vouch for it in a different way now because I collaborated with uh, 4 oncologists and 3 nurse practitioners, and all of them were a part. Well, most of them were a part of Cecilia's case, so including her main oncologist and her main nurse practitioner, and they are so all in. I mean, as you know in the book, I'm very blunt, so I'm very direct about what is missing in this entire process, and I'm also very clear that as you say, it's not the doctors and nurses who aren't with intent to do good, but their job is limited. Their job is limited to the incredible work that they do trying to save your child's life with the tools that they have. They don't have the time, the bandwidth, the knowledge, the information to do the rest. We have to. And that's what I'm trying to empower, to give to parents so they don't have to work so hard, or they don't have to be the ones to think of it, but to read this and go, oh, crap, yeah, I can do that. Oh, geez, yeah, I want to do that. And make their own choices within their family as to what they want to include or not include to be a part of that medical team and make a difference for their child, regardless of outcome, because you can make a massive difference in just how their journey is and how stressed it is for them and the rest of your family, or you know, how you can find joy and thrive in it, even amidst the absolute trauma and chaos. And you can. And It takes intention and it takes work, but it's available to us, in certain situations.
Absolutely. It's so impactful. And like I said, through what I've read so far, it's so impactful and easily sitting down and taking notes and bending pages over and just knowing what you need to flip to at that moment in time. And yeah, saying, well, yeah, I could do that. I wish I could have done that, or this is what I should be doing. It really does put you in the right direction, and I love that about it.
And know your doctors feel the same way. They
Mhm.
love it. They want you. They just don't. What frustrates me is they often will not just say, I don't know, and point you like, go look over here, try this, or
Right.
explore that. They'll just say, no, or I don't know. I think that's an area that the medical world can work on, but they really want us to be a whole part of the package with them. There's not an adversarial relationship there. In most cases, I think you and I both met some people
Mhm.
that we've fired along the way,
Yep.
and that's perfectly fine. That's just humans not getting along, too, part of it.
Yep.
But in general, they're down for the help too.
Yeah, they really honestly, if you are lucky enough to be paired with a team, an oncologist that is truly invested in what you want out of everything and what your child deserves to get, you become more than that patient doctor. You become friends. You become, here's
Yeah.
my cell phone number. Here's, let me know if there's anything I can do. And this is what we've been working with. And if they're blunt enough to tell you, we are limited here in what we can do. However,
Yeah.
this may be, and if they say, but this may be the best place for you to go and this like that, it's not them brushing you off. It's giving you the best chance and opportunity for everything to work out positively, but still stay connected to you and your case and
Mhm.
follow up with you. And that is the type of person that we want, and that's the type of person that you should really hold on to. And a lot of, to be honest with you, a lot of them are like that. You will find very few that it is what it is. They're just not. Their bedside manner sucks. They may be great
Mhm.
at what they do. Bedside manner is not. It doesn't come standard to everybody.
Mhm.
But if you find it, stick with it.
Yeah.
So I was, and like I said, I wrote notes down and everything. And a couple things that I was going to say, or that I was going to ask about in the book, is I'm still learning, even now, how to ask for help or to accept help. But the way you broke it down, which was even more, was asking for help, but also knowing what to say no to, which I thought
Yeah.
was interesting.
Yeah. I mean, so I don't think we are wired to ask for help. I think we're wired to say, I'm okay, I've got it. And part of that stems from I can remember the early days too, just like I can't talk to you right now. I don't even know what I want, much less what I need. So I have a chapter just for parents to figure out what they want and what they can ask for and how to do it if you're in a marriage, how you to do it if you're in a partnership, how to do it if you're alone parenting solo, you don't have anybody in the area, but there's ways to ask all kinds of different people um, for help. And one of the early things that you can do is to ask to ask what not to ask for, right? Which for me, the one that always hits me square in the head is um, a couple different things. Don't later if you're blessed and your kid gets into clinical remissions quickly, and then you're fighting the battle from that perspective. Don't call my kid sick in front of their face. Empower my child. So coming in and saying something about, oh, honey, you don't look sick, which was said all the time to us, is not helpful. We're trying to find a way for this 4-year-old to feel empowered and not beaten down by this system. So please don't say that. Um, I think don't hide. Don't go turtle. I think, and it was funny when I was working on one of the edits in the chapters, I realized, oh my God, I just went turtle on my girlfriend who's going through breast cancer. We're all guilty of it when we feel like, oh God, maybe they don't want to talk about it. Maybe they don't want to, I'll just let them be till they ask for help. Don't do that. You want people around you who are like, what can I do? I'm here. I've got it. And just handle it. So from the parent side of things, I lay it down for you of the things you can ask for and how you can ask for them. And don't be shy. And if you are without family nearby or a partner, reach out to send a little note to your neighbors, give it to one neighbor and have that one neighbor put it in everybody else's mailbox. Tell one teacher at school and let them spread the word so that you can say, I need help with my other child's pickup from soccer every other Thursday or whatever it is that you need, because people want to help. They just don't know how to. So enable them to be successful by helping them with a list. And you can give that list to one person. I suggest that you define it as a point person. And this point person doesn't, if you're lucky and you've got family and friends nearby, great. Ask the one that you trust getting shit done, not necessarily the one that you're closest to. So that could be a colleague at work that you know is masterful at a spreadsheet, and just say, can you organize this for me, and let them take the brunt of the work off of you. So I don't know if I quite answered your question about what not to ask for or what you don't want. I know I don't want to be I do not want to be asked or said to, I don't know how you do it, because
Mm-hmm.
none of us know how you. So
Yep.
please so tell your besties or put it in your one and only care, if you do a post online or whatever, Caring Bridge, no one knows how they do it. So please just don't even say it. It's not helpful. Just come by with my favorite coffee or surprise me with some flowers left on my doorstep. Just do something nice. But don't say that to me because it really breaks me down. And don't talk to my kid about them being sick. Be careful what you say to my other children. Be mindful of lifting them up, not scaring them any more than they need to be.
100%. I don't know how you do it. You guys are so strong.
The
Listen,
worst.
we're not. We weren't given a choice. So if you want a
Right.
simple answer, that's what it is. We weren't given a choice. I've done so many, social media videos and talks about that. Don't that kind of stuff. You're just kind of, I don't know. You're piling on in a position where we don't need it. We need that
No.
that simple reach out of just showing up with coffee or reaching out and saying, "Hey,
Mhm.
can I bring your groceries for you today?" Little things. And I use this a lot, and I say that section alone, and then talking about things, what to ask for and what to say no to, but asking for help. I call it the oxygen mask theory. You have
Totally.
to be okay before you can help somebody else. And you have to understand that if you are not in a good position, you are no good to anybody, your child, yourself, your spouse, none of that. You have to be okay to accept that help. And like I said, I'm still learning how to do it. I've always been the one that gives the help to everybody else. So to all of a
Same.
sudden be in that position, right? It's hard. Um,
Mhm.
and relinquishing some of that responsibility, because this can be an incredibly overwhelming time, and saying, like you mentioned too, one person handle your social media posts or your
Mhm.
communication with friends and family. I mean, for me, in the very beginning, again, no guide, no book, no community, no understanding of what was going on, just thrown into it. Sitting in the hospital, I would make Facebook posts, and that's how I would connect with everybody. I would not. I had my messenger, my text messages were going crazy. I responded to nobody because I just
Yeah.
put it all in one place. But having somebody appointed to do that, God, that would have been great advice at that point, because as much as you want to update everybody and keep them in the loop, nobody's really has the right to any of that information unless you choose to give them that information. And
Exactly.
you know,
And I wanted to mention that when I started to write the book in 2020, I reached out to four different on the big parent Facebook groups of various kinds of cancers, and said, hey, of course they're private as they should be. And I said, hey, I'm a cancer mama. Here's my story. Here's what I'm trying to do. Can I join the group to listen? Because I wanted to make sure that it was relevant to right now, what people were going through right now. And that's what people said again and again and again, is needing each other and needing that kind of help and asking for help. And that's why I'm very specific about the kinds of help that you can ask for, because it might feel good to somebody to write that might be very cathartic for you to write the Caring Bridge or the Facebook post. And for others, it's like, forget it. But if your friends and family or extended people don't know what's going on, that's tricky too. I wanted to circle back to one other thing that I want to empower listeners for, you may get a lot of, or even one is terrible, but in the line of don't say that, you might get several well-meaning people saying like, well, God has a special plan for your child. Just fucking don't listen to them. So whatever faith practice you have, and I happen to be Methodist, and I also really believe that every other God and every other religion is all pretty much saying the same thing. So here's what I have to say about that. It's bullshit. And there's no God out there that's going to punish you or your child. It's just life, and life just happens. So that's a person or a friend you either need to get out of your life or redirect very quickly, because that's the kind of stuff that this very much is a mental game in terms of surviving and figuring out how to thrive in this world, and that's going to mess with you a lot. So get out of that zone as quickly as you can. In terms of the help, the seeking help, I was nearly done with the book, and realized, what, there's got it, because there's grandparents, there's like sisters and brothers and who want to help and don't know how. So I ended up, and I said to my publisher, I'm just going to write a short chapter. It'll be fast. It's long, and it's for grandparents, friends, and family, because they need to know where we are coming from and what we need and don't need. So not only is it has amazing quotes from current parents as of this year about what's been working for them and what's not been working for them with their family and friends. And it gives our grandparents and our family and friends specific things that they can do to help us. It's lists that I generated. It's lists from these other cancer warrior parents. And it's meant for you to look at, and you can either copy it for yourself, either of those chapters, the one that's for you to define what you need, or to your grandparent, your parents, friends, and family, or you use it as a catalyst for like, oh yeah, I don't like that, but I like this, to help you figure out what it is that's going to give you some relief. Because as you were alluding to, and another situation I'm super passionate about talking about is you're going to burn out. This is a massive mental game and physical game as well. And if without help and without self-care, you will burn out. And I know how hard it is to say, I'm going to put myself first, or me and much less your partner, or your husband or your wife. But if you don't, they will be trashed by the end at best.
Yeah, no, that 100%. And I'll go back to one thing first and say, God's plan, however you choose to look into it, is to not take your children away. There's no part of that I'll ever believe, or that they're in a better place. They're not here with us. The only place our children should be is right here with us. And we have to come to accept at some point that they're not here, but not because he had a greater mission. I'm not a hugely religious person, but my kids did go to Catholic school all the way up to high school. So yes, they are into that stuff. But I asked a very important question to my two older girls weeks before my daughter passed. I said, if she passes, will your belief in God? She was the baby. Yep.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, will your belief in God change? And they said yes. And we've never really had a conversation about it since then, because they have their way of handling the grief is talking to their friends, which is completely fine. But I asked them that specific question because my belief in God, I think, changed a little bit, because I don't understand how that type of suffering can happen, and that's some sort of plan. I just don't agree with that. Everybody has their own beliefs, but I don't subscribe to any of that.
I think cancer made me think about that too. For those of you who are struggling with your faith or have one, is like, I think maybe back then I kind of a little bit leaned into that master plan business. And now I'm like, there's no universal, holy human or non-human. Nobody in the universe is going to do that intentionally. They're there. Your faith is your light. It's your love. It's your hope. It's your support. You are not being punished.
Right. Yeah. No, it's one of those things that you have to find, like in a position where you lose your child, you come to find ways to move forward and accept it in your mind and be at peace with things, but never saying that relief. Relief is a word that I always say is not the word that we're looking for. If your child passes after a long illness and they're suffering, relief is not the word. You become at peace with the fact that they're no longer here and no longer suffering. But as far as a plan goes, no, the only thing we've kind of gone along with is saying that she was on loan to us. She was an angel on loan to us for a short amount of time, only because the one thing that was said at her funeral was when she got to the heavenly gates, she said, "But I only had 8 years." And God said, "But look what you did with those 8 years."
Wow.
So that in itself has put me in a peaceful situation because I know the impact that she has made, and it continues today, the impact she's made.
She's sitting on your shoulder, making it right now with you.
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, that in that sense, that's as far as I'll go with that, because I do believe that the only place your child should be is with you into old age, and they should be putting us in a home when we become too much for them,
Yeah, I agree.
But so, and the other part of what you were saying too is when you get burned out, and you will get burned out very fast. And what that does is that burnout will lead to something in the pediatric cancer community, especially, as what is commonly referred to as the 80-20 rule. And that 80% is not this percentage you want to be in. 20% that's the lowest number. That's the number of families, marriages, relationships that survive this type of diagnosis and treatment. Because although I don't believe that you fall out of love with the person, I believe that the stress and what it does to you mentally will just tear things apart, because you become different people. How you survive it, I have no idea. My wife and I, we just celebrated our 20-year anniversary in June, but we've been asked that question. How did you guys make it? I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that if you don't take care of yourself, you have a much better chance of being in that 80% and not coming out on the other side as a couple that is together.
Well, it's pretty fresh. I mean, maybe that's something that you two will unpack at some point, and that'd be a pretty powerful podcast right there.
Yeah, I have asked her before. I know we actually had somebody else reach out to us and ask us that question. And, I said, did you ever feel like we were going to break up over this? And she said, yes. And she had never told me that before. Because when you're tired and you're exhausted, and you are exhausted beyond what anybody can ever think exhaustion can be, you say things, you do things. I have a temper anyway, and it's not violent, but I know that I can get upset. And when you're that tired, we're talking 48 hours with no sleep because your child is on steroids and they can't sleep, and they don't understand why, and you don't understand why. And yeah, you are burned out, and it's almost like, not that you become enemies, but you become like, we're doing this, but we're separate, but we're together. It's very difficult to explain, but I don't know what the answer is. Yeah.
Well, the way I write about this too, and I can't remember if it's been part of self-care or not, but it seems like such a selfish thing. I think even when you're not a cancer parent, like, oh, well, it's pretty, it's pretty much an American thing. We don't take care of ourselves first, or we put our health, at second place, or whatever the case may be. But when you're going through trauma, you have to, because of all the reasons you said. And same for your relationship. You have to figure out how to stay connected, because it's such a disconnecting event. You become so tactical. So I have advice. So there's a whole section on, because I feel very passionately about parents figuring out a way to take care of themselves throughout this, in big and small ways, some that involve your kids, some maybe that don't. So that's one section. But with your partner, I think I'm curious what you think. I think the first step is that you approach this trauma as a team. And I think I early on saw too many couples, when they had the opportunity to do things together, be it a certain hospital visit or a bone marrow aspirate or a larger procedure, whatever the case may be, they did not. Now, I'm not talking about families who are scrambling, because we got lucky. Our work situations were very accommodating to us at that, especially in the hairy first 6 months. And I know that's not the case for everybody. But if that's the case for you, you must do this together. You cannot have it. It is a tendency, and often the tendency, and this is going to sound totally gender biased, and I hate it, but it very much the mom thing to take over and be in charge of all the meds and be the gatekeeper of all that information, particularly if, and it could be the dad or the other partner too, the dad or another partner, if they don't have a job because they feel like that's their job. But this is too big for any one person to handle alone. And you have to be able to tag team the data, because being a keeper of that knowledge is too much for any one person. So defining a way where we would take turns being at the hospital. So in the beginning, I think the first month we kind of did everything. We did have parents locally, so we were lucky that way. And we had a baby at the time, 15 months old, was Maddie. And pretty early on, she made it clear, like, I don't like this. She'd press her little face against the window. She knew something was wrong. So we ended up starting to include her in everything as well. But we decided to also take turns to help each other as a couple. So to stay stronger as a couple, one of us would be in charge of that hospital day, and the other one stayed home with Maddie. And, toddler magic is just restorative. So then that person's in a good space. Then you tag team and you trade so that each one of you has a little bit of everything, so that no one person is burdened with this whole cancer thing because it's too much. And then you got to take care of each other. And when somebody asks you what they can do for you, say, I need you to take care. If you have other kids, I need you to, or pets or whatever, can you come every other, or just say every Thursday night for an hour and a half? And it doesn't matter what you do with your partner. It doesn't have to cost money. It doesn't have to be romantic, because you probably won't feel like getting dressed. I think our first date was, we went to, there was a beautiful Japanese garden, and we just walked. And, complete trauma buddies, but we were together and we were alone and we held hands, and that's all you need. So this isn't a big ask of you if you're in a partnership, but it is an important one, because you don't want to be that 80-20. So you've got to be team. So in that tactical side of things, you have to be in it together. You equally need to be able to rattle off all the crap that you have to do, and hold hands once a week as you walk around the block. It really doesn't matter, as long as you've got that hour, whatever someone will do for you. And I'm telling you, your neighbor, your friend, the lady down the street, somebody at your church, at work, they would be delighted to.
Absolutely. And we definitely did not take advantage of that enough during her entire 520-day battle. I know that we didn't care as much about ourselves as we should have. We didn't take care of ourselves. And it was just, I think at that point, we were scared. We didn't want to leave her. We didn't know what would happen. And which is understandable. But I know that not too long before she passed, it was about a month. It was our anniversary, and we're like, okay, well, it is what it is. It's just another day now, because we're taking care of her and we're not going to worry about it. And we had a friend of ours who's a very close friend. She's a nurse. And she said, you guys are leaving the house. I'm going to come over. I'm going to sit with her. And she literally sat with her while she took a bath. And my wife and I went to the hardware store and walked around.
Yeah. Like, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah. There was no dinner. There was none of that. It was like we got out of the house, and we might have only been gone for an hour, but it was like just that amount of time can be so important to just recharge you for that fight again. And you have to be willing to take that moment, and you have to also understand you don't have to feel guilty about it. And your children know. Your children are proud of you. They're proud that you're standing right there next to them, and they know that you need mom and dad time too. And especially with younger kids, or even the older kids as well. But I know that JC, and I'm sure you may have felt this as well, but I know JC apologized to us all the time. Said, I'm sorry, because she felt like I was sorry. I felt like I'm doing something wrong when she would get sick, or when she pulled her NG tube out. And we said, there's nothing, you didn't do this. And we're okay being here with you, taking care of you. This is what we're your mom and dad. That's what we're supposed to do. You don't have to feel guilty about it. But yeah, if you have got to take time for yourself, because if you don't, then that's when you start to drift, and you start to have the chance of not being there for your family the way that you want to be. And it's just so crucial. And I know it's fear, but you've really just got to get over that. And make sure you're okay first.
Yeah, it's fear and it's exhaustion, and there's this duplicity of, the relationship that needs and you're like, really, you're gonna make me freaking take care of somebody else? And I mean, I would argue that to this day we're not as good at taking care of each other when somebody's sick, when one of us is sick, as
Mm.
we were back before cancer, because it's just kind of like, you're gonna be okay, right? Okay, you've been through worse. So I wanted to say that when in my storytelling in the book about self-care and about couples, it does not come from doing it right from the beginning. It comes from lots and lots of mistakes that I happily and openly share, and the consequences that came from not taking care of myself early on, and how that manifested in severe anxiety, not sleeping, the list goes on and on. And what I impart to parents and impart to them today is that there are options for you. There's the couple bit that we just talked about, but for yourself, to start to take care of your mind and to manage your mental and physical journey on this, that are free, that are on YouTube, that cost nothing. It really just takes that mental shift of going, okay. And it could be that same neighbor across the street, and you say, I need to take a walk every Tuesday at 10, or every day or whatever the thing is that gets you out of the house, that gets your body moving, that gets your brain seeing a little bit of nature, that gets you not thinking about anything in the house. That makes a huge difference. It is an absolute must. We both did. I went from, it was a little trickier because I went from 3 years of treatment with Cecilia, which was successful, to immediately my dad being diagnosed with esophageal cancer. And I didn't know any better. I was so used to the high adrenaline and the help being in that mode that I just applied that directly to my dad, who passed quickly from that disease. And so PTSD was real, and it was fast. And it is unavoidable. I think if you take some small steps during your journey to provide your body with relief along the way, because many of our cancer diagnoses are years and years and years long. Or as you experienced, it's a bone marrow transplant. I mean, it just goes and it goes and it goes. So our bodies are not made to do that. If you feel selfish about it, think about it this way. You are not doing a service to your child. You cannot be for them what they need if you are burned out and bitchy and furious and pissed and a short fuse, which is completely natural if you don't get out and do something physical and get out and do something that relieves the mental stress.
Yes, absolutely. And I know that that specific advice is something that I passed on to another husband and wife whose daughter was dealing with something, and it was part of a mentorship program. And that's the same thing. You have got to be okay with taking time for yourself and making sure you're okay. Because if you're not, you are at that point of, exploding, right? And saying something you're not wanting to say, or just reacting in a bad way. And not because you're a bad person, but because you're tired and your brain is exhausted and you're out of space for new information in there. And you have to be able to do that. And
a lot of it's free. Like, talk to your social, money's tight for I would argue for most of us during treatment, because it's so freaking expensive. But your social worker can clue you into therapists or different organizations for caregivers. We had an amazing childhood family support center called Jacob's Heart that had Art for the Heart on Thursdays, where the kids would do art projects. They just had the best time, and we got one-on-one therapy. I mean, please. And it was free.
that connection alone with whenever you're in treatment, that social worker is a lifeline. And a lifeline that you have got to really, you think about it, and I don't know if there's just a negative connotation around thinking social worker, or if it's just the initial shock when you're in the room and 7 doctors come in, oncology, you've got social worker, you've got therapists, you have Make-A-Wish. They all come in, right? And at the same time, and you're like,
who the hell are you?
What is happening at this point? And, oh, don't be scared, don't be nervous. We all can, okay, whatever. But you take that connection can be huge. And like I said, we still talk to our social worker. And if I have questions or am looking for connections for myself or for other families, I still use that as a resource. And she's amazing. So don't ever, take that for granted, because those little things that doing painting or Also, the taking the walk around when you're doing treatments and taking the IV tower and going around,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
that's
you can
huge.
go. That was Seal's Jam. We would just and you couldn't do that during COVID, of course, but we'd get out because I asked, and she'd just go nurse to station, telling knock knock jokes. But we got out. We got out, and that makes a huge difference. And there's little outside of the box things you can ponder too if you're in the thick of it right now. Like, okay, I do want to work out kind of, but I'm tired. But I've got all these tasks to do, and I don't want to leave my kids. So one of the things that we did early on was we maybe somebody turned us on to this, but we would have driven 40 minutes to the hospital each week to get labs. But I asked, and they let me just go down the street. So we got to be friendly with the local labs. And so I pile the girls into the those bike trailer things with little snacks and all their books, and they were so happy. And then I got my nature time, my sort of workout, if you will. I moved, right? I moved. And they're happy that I'm feeling in my own private Idaho because they're not asking me for anything. They're happy in the back. We go to labs, which is a stressful thing, right? But we're not in the hospital. So I take that mental stress away from her and us. We're buddies now with the phlebotomist after a couple weeks because they know we come every time. We do our little routine. Cecilia's on my lap. Maddie holds her hand. We count to 3. We wail, breathe. We're done. No one cries. We're back in the trailer in 5 seconds because they take you first, which is something to know. And then we would take the bike to Bagels and sit there and have a fine time. And then I would bike back, and the labs would be waiting for me at home. So it's you can think of weird ways to okay, I can't take an hour to do this or to do that in a split ways, but right there, we took care of a medical thing. I got my sort of vague private time, a little bit of a workout. Kids had fun together. Labs are done, and we're out of there.
And that is probably some of the most incredible advice ever, because if you can find ways to do that, and just in general, like taking the sterile hospital environment and that scary 4 walls, it's out of the equation, and
Out of
just
it.
almost making it fun, right? And like, okay, you're in treatment, you're doing this, but it doesn't have to all be bad. We're gonna take a ride, and we're gonna go and do this afterwards, and making it fun so that they're not so scared when they do have to go to the hospital, and realizing that it's not all bad. It's taking that negative thing away from it, and that's huge.
It is, I'm going to segue to a little story about it was Cecilia who started to get us on the right mindset. And I do want to also mention before I tell that story that there's nothing in terms of making it a more joyful thing, especially in the beginning and then carefully the rest of your duration of treatment. There's nothing wrong with a placed bribe. So you don't want to overdo it because they can be, as my nurse practitioner says, can become pretty bratty if they think that they can get away with murder. But in the beginning, if you have a treat, and it doesn't need to be large, but there's something they really want to do, be it go to their favorite park or have, roller skating doesn't need to be a something you buy per se, but use those wisely because it can turn something negative into like, oh yeah, I'll take that thing because I know I'm going to get that other thing. That's how they're kids. They're going to think that way. Cecilia, we were in the beginning she was that kind of kid, and someone had given us the advice or we had read it that it's really, if you can and you have early knowledge, explain and explain and explain what's coming, because they do better if they know what to expect. And then they kind of repeat it in their minds, and it's nothing a surprise. It is very tempting, especially in the beginning as a parent, to not say anything because frankly, we don't want to. And it's scary. And we think, well, they'll just get scared if we tell them. But that's actually not the case with small children. They do better if they know ahead of time what's coming. So we were prepping Seal for another day, and we were like, okay, so this is going to happen and this. And then we told her the expectations we had, which were say hello to Dr. Dahl. We want you to say thank you to your nurse. And then, if all of this happens like that, then we get to go and do, at the time, it might have been a Beanie Baby prize if it was early. Or and then later we got away from that, and it was like, we're going to go to your favorite park for an hour and then get a smoothie. She's pumped because she knows what's coming. She knows what to expect. She has boundaries set for her because our kids love our boundaries. And then she's processing this, and we're like, we expect you to have a nice attitude and blah, blah, blah. And she goes, you mean you want me to have a positude? And we were like, so she's thinking in her mind, a positive attitude is what we have asked from her, which is exactly right. And that little 4-year-old's thing, though, that phrase became our mantra and kind of our rallying cry, that when we had the ability, even if it was harder and strained, to like approach this with a positive mindset of like, okay, this is what's going to happen today. I am and a big piece of that is to be able to surrender to what is going to happen that day. Because if you're fighting what's going to happen that day, the whole day, it just makes it worse.
Yeah, no, it does. And I think we're all guilty of especially when you're going through this, you will notice that a lot of things are given to your child over in like toys and gifts and things like that. And it's done out of trying to make them happy, trying to make them smile at a time when it's scary, but it can be a lot, and it can turn them into thinking that, every time I look at you and I've got a tear in my eye, that something else is going to come in. And we're guilty of that. We're guilty of leaving with way more than we started with.
Of course.
But that is huge. And I think giving, when children have a goal, right, and they know that something's coming based on something that might not be as fun, but if you get through this, or even as easy as, you do your homework, you get this that's a big tip. And I think that's something that will be very helpful for parents moving forward, who just kind of fall into that. Well, the best thing I can do is just give them something, and then we'll just get through it. Really making it more of maybe a game, a challenge, get through this and let's do it. And with smiles on our faces and all of this, and be polite. And then at the end of it, we'll do something that you want to do. That's huge.
It is, because eventually, and again, I'm talking about a model where it's a couple years long, or it's a couple months long, or something like that, where you are enduring a fairly, if you will, regular routine, even though it's cancer, right? It's prescribed. At some point after those beginning times when they were spoiled rotten and we all felt like they should be, you've got to eradicate it so that they're not, as you say, expecting something around every bend. But also for your own sanity and your kids' sanity and the rest of your kids' sanity, you've got to create what I call a new normal, a way of existing in this chaos that has some sense of normalcy to it, because you're here for a long time and you don't know the outcome. You don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to be a long time. So yeah, you can live in abject despair that entire time, or you can grieve what you've already lost and the future that you thought you had, process that, and go, okay, I'm surrendering to this new normal. This is what it's supposed to be like for X amount of time. I'm going to hope and pray that this is the outcome. Let's figure out how to do this in a way that looks like a normal situation, because it takes the pressure off of it lets your whole family exhale instead of walking on eggshells.
Yeah. And you are kind of tasked with understanding too, that if you have other children, and things like that, there will develop, and it's not a negative, like, I don't like them. There will develop jealousy at some point. That child is already receiving 125% of your time and efforts, because they should be, because you're taking care of them in this battle that they shouldn't be fighting at 4, 5, 6 years old. But you have other siblings looking at that, not in a mean way, but like, I'm over here, I'm still here.
Yeah.
I have regrets, so many, that I miss so many things of my older daughters because I was in the hospital with JC, or we weren't able to do. And I know that they don't resent me for that, and they don't resent JC for that. But at the same time, they also they can feel forgotten. They can feel left behind. And if there's a million things coming home with them every single day, it's like, but what about me? And again, it's not that negative, greedy side. It's just, we're your kids too, and that can develop. And so you just have to be really careful to balance that amongst all your children if you have other children.
I agree. And there's times when you really can't, right? If you're going through a bone marrow transplant and you have to be inpatient for X number of days, and that is what it is. I encourage families to really look at the schedule and what that might be. I devote an entire chapter to siblings for exactly the reasons you said, because they are so important, and you can risk um, just a lot of exclusion, because if you don't talk to them and spend time with them, they're just going to invent things and they're scared, or they're going to get, or particularly if they're older, they're just going to get pissed off and jealous. So with Maddie, she was tiny, but she made it really clear that her stress came from not seeing her sister. So every inpatient, she had to go. She'd just crawl into bed with her sister, hang out, hold her hand, watch Teletubbies, whatever the case may be, go up and down the hallways. It had to be for that particular child, that unit. And she was easygoing. So I grant you, it depends on what kind of kid you have. But if you don't have one that you feel like should be at the hospital or is going to, run circles around everybody, figure out a way to have a date with them, just some time, to let them hang out with you. If they want to talk, great. If they don't want to talk, great. But to your point, they need it too, because they're scared and a little annoyed.
Right. This is 100% a family diagnosis, and everybody goes through it differently. But I will say that the sibling aspect of all this, the bond and what they bring to the table, is so often forgotten about. The amount of support and the amount of love that they bring to their siblings, and what they do. Just, I tell the story often. Our oldest daughter and our 16-year-old, they had completely different bonds with JC. And with our 16-year-old now, JC would call her on the phone on FaceTime, and sometimes they would just sit there. They'd say nothing. She just wanted to have her on the other end to feel like she was there. And our oldest daughter, she would come home and say, Anna, you're playing Barbies with me. And she would tell her what she was doing. And it became just that relationship that all three of them had a different one, but this sisterly bond that they had, and that sibling bond, is so incredible and important, that they want to be involved, but they also, you have to make sure they just don't feel left out, and that it happens. And I don't think it's intentional, but it does happen.
No, that's so true. And you bring up a point that's so important, is like, don't be afraid of telling of letting them be involved. Your kids were a bit older, but still, don't be afraid of telling them what's going on, so that they can be a part of it, to what is age appropriate, of course. So we just told, we told a toddler, and then, going into 3-4 years old, we would just tell Maddie that she has childhood leukemia. She's getting medicine to make it better. She's doing great right now. All she needed to know. But she knew it, and she knew, oh, why is she in the hospital? Why is she away from me? She has to get this medicine. It's only at the hospital. Oh, okay. And I think we fear telling any age child the truth. They are much more clever than you think they are, and they're going to invent something far worse if you don't tell them in an age appropriate way.
Absolutely. And we were very open the whole time with everything that was going on. And again, with that, explaining it in a way that they could understand, but also exactly what they needed to know at that moment to be the best support system that they could be. But it is, and I also say too, that as our children going through this and they're diagnosed at such a young age, they need to be treated with the respect as an adult with going through what they're going through. And I say that in a way like they're going through something that as adults, I make the joke, the man flu is a real thing. Okay. It's a real thing. We cry about it. We lay on the floor. We're under blankets. We're crying about it, whatever. These kids go through everything with a smile on their face, and they need to be treated with the respect of how they handle this, and talk to them with as much as they can understand at their age, to be completely open and honest with what's going on. And I think it's so important, because they deserve that respect I think they demand it.
I bet JC did. She seems like that kind of kid.
Oh, 100%. That child went, when, like I said, the things about her hair, or the having kids, and the other thing is that she did start to lose hearing in one ear, and it was temporary, because it came back. But she knew that whenever she didn't want to listen to us, she would roll over on her good ear, and so she couldn't hear what we were talking about. So, it was funny, and we would try it out. We would get close to her on one ear, and we'd say ice cream. And if she didn't respond, we knew that she couldn't hear us. And then we'd say it on the other side, and we knew that that was the ear. So it was only one. But yeah, she would roll over and she would lay on her good ear, so she'd have to listen to us.
So cute.
They just, the way that they handle things is so incredible. And I've always said
Yeah.
that even if you're outside, especially if you're outside of this community, if you truly want to understand how we do this or what we do this or whatever, just speak to one of these kids for 5 minutes. 5 minutes. They will change your perspective on life. And everything that we do every single day that we get upset about, and things that road rage, whatever, it'll put it in a perspective of you saying, is it really worth it that we're upset about this type of stuff when they don't care about it? They just care about getting up every day and being a kid, and they should be able to be a kid, and they should have that opportunity, and we should be able to give them that chance.
Mic drop.
There we go. And I love talking about JC. I love talking about her journey. I love talking about all of that. And don't be afraid to ask us about it. I think a lot of people, especially during September, obviously I changed my hair color and people ask questions. It's like, well, I feel bad. I didn't want to ask. Please ask. Please ask us.
Please talk.
We want to talk about it because not enough people do. And that's why we're taking social media or podcasts or asking to be on TV or whatever we're doing, because we want you to know. We want you to hear what we have to say.
Absolutely. It's so critical. September and beyond.
Yeah, we just want to be heard, maybe not understood, but we just want to be heard. I don't want people to ever understand how we feel. I just want you to know that we are an entire community of people that oftentimes just feel left behind.
And it's important, I think, for any audience to understand. I was talking with Dr. Dahl about this last week, that the treatments have gotten markedly better over the decades, but the rate of diagnosis is the same or more. So this is not a disease that's going away. It's massive. It's 40,000 children in the U.S. annually, 400,000 globally a year. This is not a small problem.
It is not a small problem, and it is not the terrible, ugly word of rare. And the reality of the situation is that when JC was diagnosed in 2020, the number that we heard was 43 kids a day. It is now 47 kids a day. It is not getting better. It is not going away. And I've also said this as well, that, I refer to them as the commercial people because I have my own ins and outs with them, but everybody knows the commercials we're talking about. And we tout an 80% survival rate, an 80% cure rate of kids. But I want to lay out what an 80% cure rate means. It means that you will survive at least 5 years, because after 5 years, you're considered cancer-free, even though you will still do annual checkups and things like that, or how many years you go out. After 5 years, you're considered cancer-free. That means that 80% is guaranteeing 5 years of life. So, while that's amazing, and I would love to have 5 more years with JC, that's what that means. And it makes
not enough.
It's not. And when you see the way that the commercials say it and the way our government says it, it makes it seem like this problem is under control, and it is far from that.
No.
So I could go on about that all day long and scream and yell to the rooftops, and I will. But so I want to, when is the book set to be released?
Book is being launched on October 8th, so I will shortly be able to provide you, if we can figure out how to get that to your listeners, with a pre-sale code, because I want to make sure. That's my mission the entire time, is how do I get help to all of us, the 40,000 of us, or 40,000 of us a year, and then globally. We just need more data. We just need more help. We need more tactics. We need more tools. We need to feel empowered that we can make change in our child's treatment.
Yeah, and that is the advocacy side of it, whether you're doing it from inside a hospital room or whether you're doing it on the steps of your Capitol building. It is all important and all necessary, and we all need to be speaking with one voice, and having guides to do that and giving you bullet points, and the toolbox tips are amazing. I would just print those out and carry them around. But having that guide and ability is so important. So being able to do that, I think we're on the road to making a massive change and a massive difference in this community, but also how people are able to attack it, because we know the diagnoses are going to continue to come. 47 children every single day. Every family is going to hear that your child has cancer. Now those 47 families have to figure out, how do we navigate this? How do we navigate this? Was a book like this that gives you a guideline and at least a, a way to move forward and answers to questions that you may have but are afraid to ask.
A framework for taking you from beginning to whatever the outcome may be, all the way through your time and beyond. That's the hope. And that's what this podcast is doing too, empowering parents of kids with cancer.
And that is probably one of the best things that I think that this has allowed me to do. I spent an entire season doing the podcast by myself and just talking about our journey step by step and things like that. But being able to have other people come on and tell their stories, it not only gets that message out, it allows us to say their children's names, which is important. It allows organizations to share what they're doing so that we can connect and continue to share their messages. But it allows us as a community to continue to get louder and bigger. And that is, nobody wants to be part of this community, but I'm pretty sure that I can speak for everybody in it, that we will go scorched earth for everybody in this community until something is done. And that's what we're trying to do. So that's our move forward here.
That's our move. I'll get on the soapbox with all of you. Let's go.
I love it. Well, it is. And tell the listeners the name of the book.
The Cancer Parents Handbook, What Your Oncologist Doesn't Have Time to Tell You.
And they truly don't, guys. They've got a lot of things going on, but they've got the information if you're willing to ask.
Yeah.
So, I usually, at the end of the podcast, what I will do is I will ask if you and I mean, the book itself is advice all over the place, but if you specifically have advice that you would leave parents with right now, or families that are either going through this, or the parents that will unfortunately be diagnosed, what advice would you give to them?
And this really does not come from a place of trying to sell this book. I just know how I felt when I went through this, and I can feel it like it was yesterday. And I was desperate for information. I was desperate for a roadmap. I was desperate for tips and guidelines that could help me navigate this for my child, myself, my family, my husband, all of it. And I was desperate for it. So I'm just going to tell you to buy the damn book and read it, because I want so much for our community to feel in some way help.
And it absolutely will. And I can't wait to actually read the entire book. And that's something, like I said, in the beginning, I told you that I haven't sat down and read a book cover to cover since 1999, since the year I graduated high school. But from what I started, and if I was at work long enough, I would have been able to read this book entirely, because it's one of those things that not only do you relate to, but it's like somebody just telling you it's real and it's raw, and it gives you that information without all the BS and without all that crap. You just be able to hear it and take the guidelines and take the roadmap and run with it. And I love it. And I don't think anybody else will be able to put it down either. I also think, like I said, there's going to be colored sticky notes on every page, and people are going to say, okay, this is what I need here and here. And they're going to be able to flip to it. And you're going to see it carried around like the notebook they should be having, with the notes on everything going on with their child.
Yeah, that is my dream. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It is. I look forward to reading the entire book. I look forward to seeing it, and I will definitely share with our listeners when the book comes out. And I can't wait. I want to be able to sit down, and I'm going to be on a plane soon. I want to be able to sit down and just read this book and share it with as many people in our community that we've created, our Redhead Army for JC. We have been able to create everything on social media. I want to share it out as quickly as possible.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate you sharing today and being here with me. This has been incredible. And like I said, I wish we would have, and I'm sure you wish too, but I wish we would have had this book in our family 4 years ago, and these conversations and the knowledge, but I'm glad that it's out now, and it's going to do so good. So thank you so much for spending this time with me today.
Thank you for having me. Your podcast is an absolute gift.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And it has been an honor and a pleasure to be able to do it. And it's an honor to speak to you today. We will see you all next week.